Without further ado, hello everyone, and welcome to today's session. I'm Khalif, Woodard, Senior Marketing Manager here at Intelligent Generation, and we're very excited to have you join us for the latest installment of the Beyond Backup webinar series titled Mastering the Battery Storage Sales Cycle. So our mission is simple. We help our partners and clients earn, save, and protect through intelligent energy assets. So before we dive into the meat of the presentation, I just a quick reminder that the information shared today is confidential. So we ask that you please do not distribute these materials. So I will be serving as your moderator today. Joining me are two experts who live and breathe this industry. First, we have David Braun, Chief Commercial Officer at IG. We also have our co-host, Gronwick, our Director of Business Development. And together, they are going to walk you through how to transform the often complex storage sales process into a streamlined, high-margin competitive advantage.
And to what
Start again.
Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Kind of adding to what Khalif said about this being confidential, you know, the only people we've invited to this event are our partners, our channel partners. So this is an exclusive event. We weren't trying to get 5,000 people here. We're really focused on supporting all of you and helping you grow your business. Because if you guys grow, that means we're growing. So thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it. So this first slide is kind of the transition from solar to solar plus storage or standalone storage. This is something that I can really relate to because I just recently came out of the C&I solar space and joined Intelligent Generation about 6 months ago. About a year before I joined Intelligent Generation, I had personally transitioned my efforts to focus more on storage and to learn as much as I could. I was very focused on staying relevant and staying an expert for my customers. I met Intelligent Generation and specifically Dave the summer of 24 at an RE Plus regional event in the Chicago area. And I was so at that point, I really didn't know much about storage. And I walked away from that conversation and had committed myself to selling one battery project by the end of the year. So it's 6 months. And so, you know, that's a pretty aggressive goal. I did not hit my goal, but it did force me to kind of put a stake in the ground and learn as much as I could. And it took me about a year to sell my first project. So that learning curve is real. We're here to help you with that learning curve as much as possible. And, you know, like I say, like we're not the experts on everything. We're all learning and growing together. So this is a true partnership. That's how we kind of view that. As far as like hesitation, you know, I can't really relate to that. Again, once I knew this was a thing and I was learning more about it, I knew I really wanted to become an expert and learn as much as I could. But, you know, anytime you are taking on a new venture or trying to learn something new, it is kind of intimidating and overwhelming. I wouldn't say that it complicates deals. I think it actually augments the deal and things like that. But there is a lot more to learn. And I think for me, the biggest growth area that I've experienced since committing myself to the storage space was learning more about utilities, analyzing electric bills, you know, exactly how does solar impact an electric bill. I thought I was pretty knowledgeable about it, and I was, but I still learned a lot. I still have been learning a lot about how solar impacts an electric bill over the last year, and even more so with storage. That's really kind of a different way that storage hits the bill than solar. So I think the proposals themselves and understanding it are maybe a little more complicated, But as far as presenting to the customers, I haven't really felt that way at all. And I think if presented the right way and keeping it simple for our customers, I think the breakthrough is just seeing the receptiveness that people have had to storage being added to a solar project. Next slide, Khalif. All right. So, why embrace storage now? Well, I think, the elephant in the room is that the solar ITC is sunsetting. Working with a lot of you over the last 6 months, I know that you've all been working really hard at trying to close as many solar deals as possible here. So obviously that's one really good reason, why to embrace storage now. But outside of that, something that I've become much more aware of and I've learned much more about is that, the batteries are a grid necessity. And there's a lot of talk about, data centers and growing electricity needs and things like that. And there is an electricity shortage, but there's more to it than that. There's a shortage of electricity during peak hours. And that's where batteries really come in and help manage that process and manage the energy. So it reduces the shortage of electricity during peak hours. So, it is a grid necessity. And because it's a grid necessity, it's really going to make a big difference on the electricity costs that our customers are going to pay. I think, just like everything nowadays, there's so much information out there that people are much more aware than they used to be. Access to information is more readily available, things like that, which is good and bad. But there's a lot of demand coming from the marketplace. People asking us and asking probably all of you, like, hey, what's going on with batteries? Tell me about it. What's happening? Things like that. So again, like, why embrace storage now? Well, there's increased awareness and increased interest in it. So the timing is right. And I think another component of that is, a lot of businesses will spend a lot of money to start a new division of their company. It could be that they have to add a new building, add a new production line, acquire another company that gives them a competitive advantage in a certain area of their industry. Well, I think you could look at the same thing with storage. If there's a solar company, they've been pretty exclusively solar all these years. Adding storage to it is like adding a new product line, starting a new division, things like that. So that's a great way to grow revenue and build out your brand and have a bigger footprint as well. Will you turn the next slide, Khalif? All right, finding the right fit. So I think that's it's probably one of the more common questions that I get or that we get is, hey, who should we be talking to? Like, who should we sell batteries to? Like, who is the ideal customer? And I think on a real simple level, for me, my personal experience has been that it's no different than C&I solar. Businesses that are more likely to be interested in solar for their facility and their business are also the same companies that are going to be more interested in adding storage to the project or, coming back after they've done solar ready and adding a battery to it. And then maybe some more specifics. So, I'm giving you a little more meat on the bone to think about. Businesses that are bigger energy users, businesses that have, higher demand charges, things like that. I think location is pretty significant. A lot of that has to do with the incentives, the programs that utilities have put in place. And those are things that are not maybe as easy for you to know ahead of time, but those are things that we can help you with. So if you have a prospect, someone that you're interested in pursuing for a storage project, you can always reach out to us and ask us for our input or ask us what we know about, a certain part of the state or a certain state, a certain utility, things like that. I think also when it comes to like the pitch, a lot of times, even the last year when people are like, hey, what's new, Eric? What are you doing lately? And I say, well, I'm starting to learn more about batteries. And the people say, oh, for backup, right? That's what most people are going to think of when they hear the term battery. And it's certainly part of the value stack. But for example, for our business, I think only 20% of the battery assets that we operate and manage have been put in place or actually are used for backup power. So most of the benefits of storage and batteries, at least the way that we're talking about it, is for energy savings, like cost reductions, but also to generate revenue for customers as well. And that's all part of it as well, is really kind of getting people to realize there's more to a battery than just backup power. All right, Khalif, will you turn to the next slide?
Oh, yeah. Also, I just wanted to kind of chime in there when it comes to the pitch. You used an analogy earlier of a company adding a department or expanding their offerings. Wouldn't you say that for a customer, getting a battery is almost like expanding your offerings or adding a new product line because it's generating revenue? It's a significant investment, but the payback on it is amazing. And, it's kind of doing the job of a revenue generator without having to do any additional expansion. So,
that's a great point. There are certain projects that we create proposals for, run the economics model on. And in certain situations, we can actually get a customer's bill down to zero. So they're really paying no electricity costs, which is pretty remarkable. And even going beyond that, because batteries can be used to generate revenue, it can actually become a profit center. So something that historically for the last, ever since electricity started, a line item on a company's budget is no longer just a liability. It could be an asset. It could be a revenue generating opportunity. So that's a great point. And I think going back just to put a little more meat on the bone as far as ideal profiles, another good question that we get a lot is, what size company, or how do we determine what the best size company to go after is? And we would say if they're spending at least $20,000 a year on electricity, that would be one way to look at it. If you have their bill and you can actually look at their demand charges, we would kind of suggest focusing on companies that have a peak demand of 200 kW or greater. Those would be just a kind of a couple high-level data points. However, there's a lot of learning to be had with doing things that don't work out, right? We can always learn, not from failing necessarily, but when things don't work out, we can learn. So if you have a project, a good customer that will take a meeting with you, and you want us to put a proposal for you together, we're more than happy to do that. And even if the numbers don't look as good, it's going to be a great learning experience for you, more importantly, and for your customer as well. Things like that. All right, Khalif, will you turn? Perfect. All right. So let's just go down that road. You do have a customer. It's somebody that maybe went solar a couple of years ago. You have a great relationship with them. So that they'll take a meeting with you. I think we can all hopefully and probably relate to a situation like that. So what is going to be the next step? So typically right now, our channel partners will call us or they'll email us, let us know that they've got an opportunity they'd like us to create a proposal for. Our proposals are called power plans, which you can see on the slide there. It's a forecast of future savings and earnings. We've been in business 15 years. We've got some batteries we've been operating for 10 years. So we have a lot of data and experience to know, what we're able to do and what we're not able to do. And so our economic forecasts that are generated from the power plants are very, very accurate. So we're going to need some information, though, to do that. We are working on an intake form. Up till now, people have been emailing us this information. That intake form will come soon, in parentheses. We're still working out some details. But, you can see on the slide here the type of information that we need. It's similar to what you would want for creating a solar design and a solar proposal, right? Absolutely, we're going to need 1 month of electric bill. And if there's also an electric supplier, it's most of the time it's either or, like in Illinois, it's either ComEd or an electric supplier. Sometimes we'll see people will have both the supplier bill and the utility bill, and we're going to need both in that case. Interval data is something that if you have it and you want to send it to us, great. It is also something that we can order once we have the electric bill. If the project is going to have solar included in it in the design, it's a solar plus storage project. Obviously, we're going to need the solar information. KW, DC, we can, we've got tools we can, estimate what the production is going to be year one. And we can use, industry numbers to use indicative pricing for the cost. But again, the more information that you have, you can provide to us, the more accurate the proposal is going to be. Location, we're going to assume it's the same locations on the electric bill. If it's not, please let us know that. If we don't hear from you, what meters you're going to connect to, we'll kind of decide that. And so on and so forth. So that's just kind of a list of things that we're going to need. And from that, we're going to create a power plan for you and your customer. It'll be a sales presentation, and it will also be a spreadsheet of discounted cash flows. And normally we're asking for about a 2-week turnaround time on that. We're always trying to improve that. In some cases, we have been improving on that turnaround time. And if I'm honest, and some of you probably can relate to this because you've waited longer than 2 weeks for me. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but we are trying to speed that up. But 2 weeks is probably what you should expect. I do see a couple questions, Khalif. Do you?
Yeah, we're going to save those questions for at the end, and we'll wrap that up. Before we move on to the next slide, the ITC strategy, could you maybe talk about that a little bit in terms of what that process is?
Sure. Yeah, I think just are you a firm that's really focused on domestic content? So you're going to source only products so the project will get approved for domestic content. Also, like energy communities, Illinois, there's a lot of energy communities. So, if you know that the project is located in an energy community, you can let us know that. We can also look it up as well. But again, the more information you give us on the front end, the smoother and more efficient the whole process will go.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the size customer as well and types of customers that we're targeting that are going to work best?
Yeah, so we've touched on it a little bit. We can go into more detail because I think it's an important one. I think low-hanging fruit, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, is if you have a customer that already has gone solar, that's low-hanging fruit. Reach out to them to see if they're interested in learning what a battery could do for them as well. As far as sizing, we talked about the bill size or the KW, minimum 200 KW peak demand on their electric bill. What other kind of size requirements should we talk about?
I think that covers it. That was a lot of the chat actions going on right now in the chat. So we can maybe circle back to that as well.
Sure.
I think it's worth mentioning that it's not, we talked about this earlier, it's not just the dollar amount on their electricity bill, because a customer can have a high electricity bill, right? But it doesn't mean that they're a good fit for a battery. Is that correct in assuming?
I would say not all. I mean, the cost is a good indicator, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a good fit. Yes, you're correct.
And that has to do with the peak demand, right? If it's flat, not as beneficial, but if there's times when that peak is higher.
Yeah, like residential multifamily tends to be that way. Like they may have a big bill, but their peak load is really low. It's pretty constant, things like that.
Okay. Really? Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the power plan. Eric talked about kind of the inputs and a bit on some of the outputs. I'll talk more about the outputs in the coming slides as well. But yeah, the power plan itself is part of IG's power suite of software covering the end-to-end process of operating and the battery, all the way from the sales process at the beginning, which is where the power plan comes in to help, through to the operations and ultimately to dashboards that we can provide to the customer that show the financial benefits that they're gaining on a month-to-month basis as part of the software package. But at the front end, the important part from a sales perspective is being able to identify what the value proposition is for the customer, and what we've developed with the power plan. And credit to Mark Groom, our Chief Operating Officer, who is the architect of that. It's really a fantastic model, and I think really the best in the market, certainly for PJM, in terms of modeling the benefits that a battery can have, and it matches up to the strategies that IG will employ to operate the battery over the life of that battery. So we're really simulating the future, modeling what the optimal battery size is, taking into account the customer load profile, the solar and the solar generation profile that's on the account, or that you're proposing, through to including estimates of forward prices for energy, future prices for capacity and transmission, and ancillary services, all of that together, to be able to generate what is the optimal way to use that battery, and then how does that look from a cash flow perspective. So ultimately it generates a set of discounted cash flows out into the future, and then we can take economic metrics from that. What's the payback period? What's the internal rate of return? And then that feeds into a sales presentation. I'll walk through that in a minute, but it also feeds into a statement of discounted cash flows that can be ultimately presented to the customer. Because as you work through the sales process, typically, if the sale is going to go forward, you're going to end up talking to someone in the customer's financial area, a CFO, a comptroller, a treasurer, somebody like that, who wants to go through the numbers and really understand where these discounts are coming from, how this is working. May even want us to ask, where the IRS codes are these? How do I fill out the IRS forms? We can provide all that. In fact, we have what's called the cheat sheet as part of the power plan that refers to all of those important documents that customers are going to want to look at, so they can do their due diligence and prove that it's really real. Because a lot of times these savings look like they're too good to be true. So this helps us make these estimates, and then help convince the customer that they are in fact true, and now is the right time to go forward with the battery. It also can be used then to feed into financial modeling for third-party ownership, whether that's under a PPA structure, energy as a services, a lease, whatever it's going to be. The bankers and investment partners are going to want to look at the cash flows as well. So we can provide an output from the power plan for that. Let's turn though to really the sales pieces of that. So Khalif, if you can go to the next slide, looking at, sorry, I'm moving my slides too internally. We can generate what are called the power slides. And I'll talk to a couple of key excerpts from that, but really this is a sales presentation for you to use to make an initial presentation to the customer. So this is really the first key slide. We include on there a satellite image of the property, the solar sizing, the recommended battery sizing, all that's on the left, and then the diagram on the right allows us to talk about how the power is flowing, that it's flowing from the solar. From a battery perspective, power can flow, obviously needs to flow in and out of the battery to charge and discharge, but also can flow across the point of interconnect using net metering. So the battery can charge or discharge from and to the grid, to the customer load. And when there's excess solar, obviously that can be exported as well. So we use that slide to talk to just how it's going to operate. And then from a data and controls perspective, IG, they're shown up in that little cloud icon at the upper right. IG software for operating is really running in the cloud. We're at host Google data center hosting our software, we're communicating to the battery through a VPN tunnel into a device that we'll give to you as the EPC to install at the customer site, to plug into the site controller or EMS of the battery. That's how we're reading and writing to the battery and controlling it. So that's all part of that package, and that's how we talk about then how we're communicating to and from the battery. Moving on to the next slide. This really starts to talk more about how the battery is operating from a load perspective. On the slide upper left is the existing load profile. We've got a band of gray there. That's the typical range on a typical day of power by hour. The x-axis there is half-hour periods throughout the day, so that's why it goes from 0 to 48. Those are 48 half-hour periods, so it's like a 24-hour day. And then the y-axis is the load, the customer load. This is all pre-project. And then the red line is the max day for the year, and the green line is the min day for the year. So you can see what the range and how the customer's load is operating. This one has an interesting load profile, and it seems to be some sort of a batch process that's going on throughout the day, and machines turning on and off. And then the bottom left shows post-solar and storage project, what that load profile to the point of interconnect changes to. And you can see there's less load during the day because the solar is creating some of that load. The customer's buying less from the grid, and then the lines become a little more erratic or sporadic, and that's where our model is showing the battery operating in balancing services markets with PJM to help keep the grid in balance, and that's one of the key financial drivers for our services, providing and getting paid for that balancing service. And then on the right, you see graphs showing the amount of capacity and transmission obligation, or also known as peak load contribution, PLC, for capacity and net transmission service, NSPL. Network transmission service, NSPL value, showing that the customer, today is paying for that, but after the battery and solar is installed, they can actually receive a credit through net metering from ComEd or the retail supplier for providing capacity and transmission services back to the grid. And again, that's a key part of the savings and revenues. So all this allows us to talk about how those are working economically and to change the load profile of the customer with the battery and solar. Moving on to the next slide, we really summarize here all the key financials for the project, starting with the turnkey budget estimate. At the end of the day, it's up to the EPC to go and make estimations and provide that to us. But up front, oftentimes, you haven't sent an engineer out there. You don't know exactly what the site looks like or what the design is going to be. So our model can actually use past data points on project costs, on battery costs, and come up with an estimate of the turnkey budget total for the project that we can update that later as more is known about the project design and cost estimates. And then across the top there, the benefits of the incentives and rebates. In this case, almost 92% of that project cost, that project CapEx, comes back in year one from the incentives and the rebates, which obviously speeds up the payback on this. This is a 1.6-year payback and a great almost 25% internal rate of return. From an operating perspective, then the bottom right panel shows graphically in that upside down waterfall how the savings is occurring. The red line is the customer's current estimated total billing for a 1-year period for electricity, and then the green line step up showing the savings, SRECs, and revenues from frequency regulation, how they lower the bill for this customer, and ultimately what the savings look like over a 15-year period there on the right. So not only is there great payback from the incentives and benefits in this, but also some significant operating savings. Looks like we're potentially knocking as much as 2/3 of the customer's bill off going forward. So these are key slides that we recommend that you use for conveying, at least on an initial basis, what the project value is going to be and how that monetizes. And we're also looking for input on this. We'd love to see how we can improve this, we're familiar with what ETB, for instance, generates for solar, and we know a lot of you are using tools like that for presentation development, and love to get some input on how we can improve this to make let you make this your own, and use these slides at least for the initial sales presentations. So we'll be talking more in coming weeks and months with a lot of you about getting some input there. Moving to the next slide, I'd like to talk, kind of like about how the process goes here. Khalif, are you jumping in with a question?
Yeah, so I think it's worth noting, and this kind of dates back to the previous slide that Eric was talking about as far as hesitancy. So you may come across questions that you do not know the answer to when presenting this information. It is completely okay to say, I'm not sure, and come back to us to answer those questions accurately rather than to give a customer an inaccurate answer. And we have several examples of that working with partners where, the question may seem like something you should know, and you feel like you don't, you want to give an answer, but if you just come back to us, we'll give you an accurate answer, based off the information provided. Just want to throw that in.
Well, and also reiterate also that Eric and I are available to jump on and join you in meetings, whether that's by video with to help walk through the proposals for the customer, or come out in person to sit down and do a live sales presentation, because we realize that this is a lot of very detailed and arcane information that not a lot of you are familiar with. So we're happy to help with that sale and really encourage that, getting us involved so we can help make the best pitch possible. So feel free to reach out to us anytime to set up those kinds of meetings. Turning to a little more of the process from a beyond the initial pitch stage, but ultimately where you should be looking to go with this is to get some kind of an initial commitment from the customer through a letter of intent or a contingent contract that commits the customer to use you for developing the project. Oftentimes, we really recommend that you charge for those initial engineering services that will lead to that design that leads to being able to submit the interconnection request to the utility. And certainly, obviously, collecting for those interconnection fees that the utilities are going to charge as well. As my colleague Mark Throom likes to say, that which is free has no value. So you force customer commitment when there's initial charges up front, and then that that's going to be real, and they're not just asking you to run through those expensive design work when they're not really that serious. But if they put some money into it, they're going to be serious about it. So we also, in many cases, do three-way LOIs at this stage, where IG is a signatory on that letter agreement, and committing that if the project gets built, that IG will operate it. That's both. Obviously, we love to have that because then it's committed to us, but also the customer can gain comfort in that there will be an operator committed to doing this, and a path to monetizing the value of the battery in line with what that power plan estimated to deliver. So that's the first stage, really, that LOI or contingent contract stage. That leads through interconnection. We can provide some level of help in interconnection. We've gone through enough of these that we've got some experience as to what the utilities are looking for, what some of their pushbacks are, how to answer those pushbacks. So happy to jump on the phone and advise on issues like that. And then and also how ComEd in Illinois, how ComEd's changes to the solar pit storage incentive will come into play. Where we think that ComEd will be providing reimbursement for more of the interconnection costs than they have in the past. So that's something that's kind of an evolving issue at the moment to comply with the SERJA bill that was signed back in January. So we'll start to learn how ComEd's going to go calculating those rebates for interconnection, and the best way to optimize getting the most out of those rebates. And we can also provide support on the engineering side. I'd say more so from the standpoint of the communications paths. We do have a guidebook for the installation of IG's communication technology into the battery that we're happy to provide to you as part of the design work, so that you know and have the right expectations and the right things like revenue grade metering installed at the right points, how all that needs to get wired back into the battery, and then ultimately into IG's interface. So those are details that we can provide support on, and jump on calls and have our engineering team jump on calls if necessary to help walk you through that. Then obviously once that project gets into contracting, I'll talk about the contracts in a minute, but ultimately this ends in a battery getting built and IG actively managing that battery for the life of the battery and providing that constant optimization for the battery in real time. That's what our software is designed to do, is optimize in real time what the battery is doing, sending commands to it to charge or discharge, to optimize that value stack and put it into action and monetize those returns that the customer is expecting from the battery and the solar, and generating those savings. Turning then to contracting, obviously you'll have development contracts or EPC contracts with the customer. So that would be between the developer or EPC to the customer, depending on just what the scope of that lead partner is. And that may also include financing, either through a PPA, energy services agreement, lease agreement, whatever that is. So those are going to be contracts between you and the EPC, you and the customer, and possibly the third-party financier if there's a third-party financing involved. And then from an IG perspective, we have what's called a setup agreement that we sign with the developer or EPC, and that spells out our involvement and your requirements at the construction phase of the project. IG provides that edge communications device that the EPC electricians will need to install at the site. That device historically is connected through hardwired internet connections into the customer's interconnection service provider, possibly through their firewall. Those are issues that all need to get dealt with early on in the project to make sure that the customer's IT group is aware of that and how to deal with that. But we're also starting to roll out some additional options for independent control and independent communication into the battery through cellular communications, so that we can bypass needing to deal with the customer's IT and infrastructure from a internet perspective. So, but that EPC contract, the setup fee agreement contract, needs to be between the developer and the EPC. IG, as most of you know, does charge a setup fee at the start of the project. We're typically looking to get that collected from the EPC who's going to bill it to the customer, and collect that with that first milestone payment at NTP, where typically you're also taking a large down payment on battery and other long lead time equipment. And then from that point forward, there's work that IG does to begin the registration process for the battery with PJM, and that process does take several months. And then the other, once that project is built and the battery OEM has commissioned it, said it's ready to operate, then we need to step in and do our commissioning, our testing, and final testing with PJM to be able to get the battery into the market. So that all happens obviously after PTO and leads up to initial commercial operation, which is usually I would say a 1 to 2 month process after PTO. Once that battery is in operation, obviously IG takes over and operates it on a long-term agreement. So that agreement is between the customer and IG, and possibly three-way with a third-party owner if there's third-party ownership, and we call that a subscription services agreement. So we would look to get that signed though up front. Once once the customer is committed to with a notice to proceed, we should be getting that subscription services agreement also wrapped up and negotiated and in place and signed, so that we're ready to go when the battery gets through PTO and it leads to COD, and we can begin to immediately generate revenue from that battery. So we have form agreements for all of these. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with those. You've looked at them, and we're happy to get those specified to individual contracts when you're ready for those. So that is the contracting process and how we work from there. So Khalif, do you want to take over and talk about some of the marketing toolkit that we have?
Definitely, Dave. So first of all, thank you for that great presentation, you and Eric. And as we sort of wrap up the core content of the presentation, I just want to highlight that, our channel partner program that we built is, specifically, created to give you tools to help you win. So we don't just provide the software, we provide the ammunition that you need to close deals. So what's the ammunition? That includes co-branded one-pagers at your request. As Dave alluded to earlier, we have our power slides. But outside of that, if you need, a custom pitch deck that you think would get the point across better for your audience, we're more than welcome to assist you with that. As well as real world case studies where we can show you, examples of the success IG has had, and customer visits. So if we've seen that with a lot of our closed deals, going on site and speaking to a champion at the customer site really makes a difference in terms of the decision making for a potential customer.
Yeah, our just jump in for a second on that, Khalif. Our long-term customers like Apt Electronics and Maggot Glove and Safety are some of our greatest salespeople because they're happy to give tours of their facilities, the solar, their solar installations on the roof, battery installations, the switchgear, and talk to the customer and really give a testimonial live and answer questions about how this works, and these rebates are real. They get checks. They get checks from IG every month for the balancing services operations, frequency regulation. So, if you are interested in a tour of one of those locations or want to bring some prospects out, we do regularly have tours. We've got one we're working to schedule right now in the next few weeks at Apt Electronics. Those are great places, and oftentimes customers come out of there saying, "Yeah, let's go do this." I was on one 2 years ago where it was snowing out. We went up on the roof. The owner of the prospects company was a 90-year-old man, and he went up on the roof. We helped him through the snow to go look at the battery, and he came out of that, and we sat down at a table, and he looked at his his operations manager and said, "Let's go get this done. We need one of these." And so that battery now is just been installed and reaching PTO very shortly. So it really works, and so I encourage you to use those opportunities to take prospects to go see these things in real life, because touching it, feeling it, being able to talk to someone who's got the experience with the benefits of the battery is really a big benefit and helps with the sale.
Yeah, definitely. And touching that check probably makes a difference too. Last year we had G&W with Governor Pritzker, where a $3 million check was presented. So I think the economic benefits definitely make it worth going to see in person. And even as for you as a channel partner, if you haven't closed an opportunity, going on site, seeing the battery, and talking to our champions at customer sites can be very beneficial for you, because you get to kind of speak the language, the decision maker. And so lastly here, your immediate action item. If you have a big lead in your pipeline right now, if you have a pipeline of clients from your solar portfolio, I urge you to check in. Don't wait. Even if we provided a power plan 6 months ago and maybe the opportunity went dormant, these deals, when you talk about mastering the battery storage sales cycle, sometimes they take a long time. It's great when you have 6 to 8 months and the deal's done, but Dave, you can speak to this. We have some opportunities we've been chasing for 8 to 10 years. And,
Yeah, there was a classic deal that it was actually one of the first sales pitches that IG ever went on. It finally closed, and our channel partner, who is the developer of the project, after it closed, he looked back in his files and pulled out the initial sales presentation, and the date was March 12th, I believe, 2012. And so 14 years to the day that contract closed. So some of these sales do take a long time. That was probably an extreme case because batteries were still in their infancy yet. There really were no, even in front of the meter, batteries connected to the grid in PJM at that time. So it was very early stage, but it's come back around. In the meantime, they put in solar, that customer, and now they're adding 2 megawatts of battery to that solar array, and hopefully that comes on and gets done later this year or early next year. So we've got another deal too that's in construction now as well. It's been 7 or 8 years in the sales and development process. So that's not to say things can't take place faster. We like I said, we've got several projects that from initial contact with the customer to having the thing actually in operation is going to be under 2 years. So that kind of gives you the range on what we're talking about. And a lot of the time is just because, this is a long time process. As you know, we've got to wait 4 to 6 months for interconnection. You've got long lead times on switchgear and batteries and transformers. So to get a major electrical project done like this in 2 years is a pretty fast turnaround. So good. With that, Khalif, are we ready to start talking about some of the questions here on the chat?
Yep. Just want to give another reminder. Don't give up, right? Reach out to us for any help you may need. This is a long, methodical sales cycle, but if you stay consistent and you show prospects, the financial benefits before the shovel even hits the ground, I think we can make this happen as a community, as partners of ours. We want to see you guys be successful. So with that being said, we're going to open up the floor for questions. I'm checking the chat here. Let's see.
Yeah, we just run straight down these. I mean, I think we answered Emily's pretty well. Just a little more on that in terms of the questions. What's the ideal customer peak demand charge? And Joe Stevens responded with 200 kW, which I think that's a good walking around number that I like to use. Spend is going to be, call it $15,000, $20,000 a month, something like that. That level and larger begins to be a good opportunity. We do have some customers that are much smaller than that, particularly in Illinois, where there's some, I would say, unique and beneficial tariffs that ComEd has that allow us to do some things with smaller customers. It becomes a little tricky though, because you talk about a battery that ends up using more kilowatt hours than the host site is using, which causes some unique issues. But it's definitely possible to look at something like that in Illinois that's smaller. Outside of Illinois, I think I would even say it's at least 200, if not 500 kW in many utilities, because what we're also finding is a lot of the utilities don't want backfeed and are being very restrictive in their interconnection agreements to what can backfeed. And we also find that the economics, the economics of scale of the projects really start to become beneficial when you're over a 500 kW battery. You can go buy a 125 kW battery. There's a lot of companies out there now bringing those to market. Companies like NeoVolta and Generac and Socamec, SunGrow all have Canadian, I think all have smaller batteries. CPS all have smaller batteries. But the cost per watt starts to fall apart when you're below 500 kW, in our view, because you still have virtually the same engineering costs. You still have to pour a pad. You're still running conduit and copper. You may have to change out a switchgear. And when you've got that small of a battery there, you're not generating a lot, really enough savings, oftentimes, to be able to overcome all those costs and make a good beneficial project. Now, I also admit that I'm a bit jaded. We see a lot of projects here in Illinois paying back in 1 to 2 years. So I'm talking about projects that don't look as good, and they're paying back in 5 or 6 years, and people in many other markets would jump at that. And think that's a great return. So, it really boils down to looking at the power plan, how the project monetizes, and whether it's going to make sense at that size. And that's exactly where we step in with help and advice, and ultimately that cash flow that's going to help with that modeling and understanding what the benefits are. So I hope that helps. Joe Stevens asked, most of their clients are in Ohio, behind Duke and AEP, and yeah, definitely, we are growing into other states. We do have a project currently in construction that's going to come online, power up here, hopefully by the end of the second quarter. That's up in Cleveland. It's a 15 megawatt project. But we are actively pricing and looking at projects in other parts of Ohio, as well as Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and soon down into Maryland and Virginia, we hope, as we look at the marketplaces there throughout this year. But it all depends, though, on a lot of detailed work regarding what tariff the customer is on, what options the utility has. Ohio has kind of some unique tariffs for PJM in that the transmission costs are typically billed by the utility as a non-bypassable on a monthly cost per kW distribution charge basis, as opposed to the more common PJM method of coincident peaks, and basically the charges being based on what the customer is using during the grid coincident peak. So because of that, but AEP and First Energy, for instance, have options to do that kind of billing. Duke does not. AES has the coincident peak billing automatically. So it kind of depends on the customer billing, and what tariff they're on and what utility they're in. So we can help look at all that, though. But Ohio is definitely a good opportunity for batteries right now. Michael Conway asks about distributed generation front of meter. Definitely something we're keeping our eye on, particularly in Illinois, where the Surja bill created a new class of in front of the meter batteries under state jurisdiction, not FERC jurisdiction, that can be up to 5 megawatts standalone. Call it something like community storage, sort of like community solar, similar concept. We are definitely looking at that right now. We're waiting to see how ComEd comes out with their tariffs on that particular type of application, so we can really understand and review how that we can monetize the charges and create a value proposition for that battery. ComEd has been rolling out slowly their draft tariffs to comply with Surja. And so we're going through review processes, both IG with ComEd and the ICC staff, as well as ICEA and Joint Solar Parties, which is a lobbying group collective of ICEA, National SEIA, and CCSA. We're working to negotiate with ComEd on those tariffs, and Ameren soon. Ameren has not released any tariffs yet, but we're expecting them to soon, to be able to model what those front of meter batteries in particular will be, and also any changes that might be coming down the pike with behind the meter. For instance, there will be a virtual power plant program as well, and we have a copy of that tariff right now. We've been working with ComEd to try to make sure that that's fully compliant with Surja and doing what we needed to do. So more to come in the coming month or two. ComEd and Ameren are required to file all those tariffs with the commission by June 1. So we're 50 days away from knowing with more certainty what those are going to look like at the very latest. And Kevin's question here about the project that we showed an example of. Yes, that was a 506 kW PV AC and a 979 Tesla 4-hour mega pack in that example, which I thought was a pretty typical of what we see for a lot of projects. That kind of a solar plus storage structure. So, and then a question from Joe. We do have a sample LOI document that we've used with some of our EPC partners, and happy to share that, and I can get that out to you, Joe. And if anyone else is interested in seeing that, we'd be happy to do that. as well. So Shannon asked about frequency regulation incentives with impacts on the battery life. It's a great question and one we address also. And Jay, our founder, jumped in with a response there, so I'll read Jay's response. Thank you, Jay. But he says, "Hi, Shannon. IG is coming up on a 9-year anniversary with one of its very first customers, which was a 2-hour battery doing frequency regulation. Because FR is not a deep cycle application, it is many shallow cycles. The number of cycles follows a logarithmic scale, millions rather than thousands." So Jay Ever, the mathematician, jumping in with his logarithmic scale reference there, which is always nice. But at the end of the day, what's particularly, I think, causing decay on lithium-ion batteries in particular is full discharge cycles, when you're going from 0 to 100% charge and back down to 0. Those kinds of full cycle charges are what really cause heat within the battery, which ultimately leads to decay in that battery capability and battery life. You may experience this with your phone, for instance. However, we're not operating typically with frequency. Frequency regulation does not require that kind of deep cycle. It's really kind of a plus or minus 10%, 15% around a steady state. So we're not going deep cycle on those. It's a lot of microcycles, which does not impact the battery life as much. And as Jay said, that battery out at Apt Electronics is coming up on 9 years old and it's still operating very well. And so we expect on a 4-hour battery to be able to get 15 years out of that battery, and that's why Tesla's warranting that 4-hour battery for 15 years. Go ahead. Yeah.
Worth mentioning. So I don't think we talked about this, but how do we handle value stacking? So specifically, how do we decide when to prioritize cap and trans reduction versus PJM frequency regulation? Like, how do we know when to use what?
That's the secret sauce. That's optimizing how to maximize that customer savings and revenue share. So the cap and trans operations just take a few days a year because it's really based on the 5 highest coincident peaks of the grid and what the customer meter is showing at those times. So that's a priority. But we look at the rest of the value stack and constantly recalculate what is the best and most optimum economic use of the battery in every moment. So that's part of the secret sauce of what we do. Just a couple more here as we're coming up on the hour. Interconnection costs. Arnie Stramel asked about that. The SURGA Act does require that ComEd rebate the incremental costs of battery interconnection. And that's something that ComEd is working to put a system and process in place for right now. And that's some of what we're working with ComEd and the commission staff about is how do they calculate that and what are the orders of calculation. So we'll know more about that, I think, in the coming months. But basically, the bottom line is, if the battery is being used for frequency regulation and it's paired with solar, both of those requirements have to be true, then ComEd is required to rebate the costs directly related to the battery interconnection. That would be, so they have to separate out what's battery, what's solar in that interconnection cost, which is going to be a complicated process that I think they're still trying to figure out. And then Arnie's last question here, any idea what the split is, if any, on 3 gigawatt batteries specified in SURGA between Ameren and ComEd? Yes, Arnie, that is definitely specified in SURGA. I can't quote it off the top of my head, but it's roughly 70-30. That 70% of that will be in ComEd PJM and 30% will be in Ameren. Those are rough numbers, and that's based on the load split across the state between the two utilities and ISOs. But I can look that up and get that back to you. But it is specified in the law, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Great. Well, you've been a great audience. We really appreciate your attendance today and your interest. And as I've said before, IG needs these partnerships, and we really value this as a partnership and want to work with you on all of these sales, because these projects don't exist today, and they need to be built. IG needs projects to be able to operate, and we need you as our partners to get those developed and get those installed. So we appreciate and value the relationships we have with all of you, and feel free and please reach out with questions and with projects. So with that, Khalif, I'll turn it back to you.
Again, first, thank you and Eric for a great presentation. Also, thank you to Jay for popping in the chat there. It's always an honor to have you participate. If you are interested in the recording of the video or the overview of the presentation, feel free to reach out. We'll get it back to you. But other than that, thank you for being a part of the webinar, and be on the lookout for the next invite or the invite to our next webinar series and the Beyond Backup webinar series. Thank you.